Hi, everyone, and welcome to The X, a podcast from inside Silicon Valley about how experience shapes everything from products to services to entire businesses. I'm Brian McLean, and I'm here with Demetrius Madrigal. Today, we're going to have some fun, and we're going to talk about products that kept us sane in 2020. As we reflect on the year and all that has happened, we wanted to share with everyone the top 5 products and services that helped us make it through. I want to point out that we're not getting paid for advertising any of the products that we're going to talk about today. These are just the products that Dee and I individually picked out. So we don't even know what each other picked. Like, we wrote out a list and decided that we weren't going to tell one another, and then we were going to do it live on this episode. Typically, this week we would be at CES, but because of the coronavirus, CES is not happening. It's actually a digital event where you can log in and check out all the different products and things like that. But we thought it'd be fun to use this time to kind of reflect back and figure out what were the things that we really loved in 2020 that emerged. So, good evening, Dee. It took me a while, but I got my top 5 in front of me, and I can't wait to hear what your list is like.
Yeah, it took me a little while to think through when you posed this to me. I was like, oh, what were the things? A few things are a little bit obvious.
Uh-huh.
And some of them are like, all right, well, what else was I using? I had to take like a stock of what I had been doing during the pandemic.
Yeah. So what do you want to do? You want to go back and forth? Like, you start, go with your first one, and then I'll jump in and give you my first one, and we'll just go through all 5 of them like that?
Sure. You want to hear what I was thinking first?
Yeah. What's your, I'm not going to call it a number one, because I know that both of us looked at these and equally loved all of these products for different reasons. So let's just say whatever the first product is that you came up with.
Well, yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, in no particular order. These are the 5 things. So my first one, when you first posed the question to me, the first thing that came to my head was, well, streaming video, because obviously, you're stuck at home, you're filling hours to some extent, and streaming video became one of the major ways to do that. So I was thinking to myself, I didn't want to necessarily just do streaming video. I had to think to myself, what streaming video service did I use the most? And it might surprise you, because off the top of my head, I was like, oh, Netflix, Disney Plus, all these things that we've talked about. But what really won out was YouTube. I have watched, and I continue to watch, YouTube a lot. There's just so much content. There's a YouTube video for everything. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'm like installing new wall anchors for a new shelf or something. Like, oh, maybe I need to look something up on YouTube real quick. You get these tutorials, and even if it's something you've done 100 times, there might be little details that you forget. So it's nice to get a little refresher. Then there's tons of entertainment videos out there. We did a whole podcast on streamers and stuff. And I think just streaming as a phenomenon is fascinating. So that's always really cool to check out also.
So do you subscribe to any channels in particular? Like, what were the ones that you really loved that you maybe listened to every week, watched every week?
You know what? I noticed that it progresses through change. So I'll get into a channel and I'll watch it for a while, and then I'll kind of get bored of it and I'll move on to something else. So I watched a ton of Hot Ones videos. I'll watch SNL on Sunday morning, watched a lot of NFL videos, on Mondays and Tuesdays. I might watch the recaps of the games I didn't get to see over the weekend. Over the past month or so, I stumbled across a video. I watch a lot of gaming videos because I love gaming. And somebody did a parody of Minecraft videos because they're so popular on YouTube. Did a parody of these drama videos that are out there. They did a parody drama video about a very popular Minecraft YouTuber. And I watched the parody video, and that made me want to go check out the Minecraft YouTubers videos. And that got me back into Minecraft. So I've been watching a lot of Minecraft videos because I play it maybe every year or two, and every time I come back, they've done a major update, and a bunch of game mechanics have changed. Mm-hmm. So you have to reteach yourself how the game works.
Yeah, there's some great stuff, and I actually feel like every year that passes, I feel like YouTube gets better. I was just talking to my wife this morning and actually telling her that I feel like the coronavirus really pushed a lot of the traditional television personalities into a more casual, fun, small bite kind of show, right? There's if you even look at Jimmy Fallon's show, you could tell he doesn't comb his hair the same way anymore. Alton Brown sits inside of his trailer that they use to travel around the country when he does like his cooking shows, and all he does is sit there and review stuff like bread and sandwiches and things like that. And you could tell he's just wearing normal clothes and he's getting, hundreds of thousands of views. I think people are really enjoying this kind of casual experience that seems to be happening. I mean, for me, I watch Adam Savage Tested. Like he has these 1 day builds where he'll just go into his shop. He lives in San Francisco. He's an industrial designer, and he was the host of Mythbusters. And he goes into his shop and he goes, "Up today, I'm going to build Mandalorian helmet." And suddenly he just starts building this thing, and it's so meditative to just sit there and watch somebody go through and follow their process and build something. The other couple ones I was going to mention to you was, have you seen Reunited Apart?
Sounds familiar. I
So
don't
it's,
think I've seen it, but I've heard of it.
yeah, it's super cool. It's like Josh, I think it's Josh Gad, who played
Oh yeah.
Olaf.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So he's got this show where he brings together all these people who used to be on a show that we loved from like the 80s or 90s, and he brings them all on like a Zoom call, and then asks them a ton of questions about making that show. Could be the Karate Kid. It was he's done Back to the Future and that kind of stuff. And it's
Yeah,
just the Goonies.
I watched the Princess Bride one, which was I think it was a fundraiser, but that one was really good.
Yeah, they're great. And then I think one of the other shows I watch is Jamie O'Brien's vlog from Hawaii. He's a pipeline surfer and lives right on the
Hmm.
beach over near Pipeline there in Oahu. And what's actually really interesting about it was that, like, I like to surf, so I like to watch the surfing. But the thing I like is it actually sucks me in and makes me feel like I'm in Hawaii with him. Because he's like, "Good morning, everyone from Hawaii. I'm making my coffee." And then he looks out his window and then he walks out on the sand and he does this like 2 or 3 times a week, and you're like, "Man, I actually feel like I'm there." Right? Like it gives you like
That's
a
pretty awesome.
mental break. So
Yeah,
there's some good stuff.
that's the kind of thing where it has the danger of making you sad that you're not in Hawaii.
Well, it hasn't done that, only because he's always like, "I'm here because you can't be here, but like, here, let me give you this experience." And it's so
Mhm.
like interesting for him to go to like Foodland and be shopping, and then 15 minutes later he's like waxing his board and he's going to show you what it's like to actually like surf in the tube, at Pipeline. And it's a great vlog, if you haven't checked it
Yeah.
out.
Well, one of the things about YouTube that I have actually brought up to our friends at other companies before is it's shocking to me that there's not a real competitor to YouTube. The closest thing is Twitch, but that's live streaming. It's a little bit different. YouTube
Yeah.
tried to put out their YouTube gaming, and it's got live streaming, but it hasn't really taken off. But I'm surprised with how much legitimate complaints that YouTubers have about how YouTube runs their service and how they'll change elements of monetization or verification or the recommendations algorithm without looping them in. That someone like Amazon, which has all the infrastructure and which has a great brand around, especially around gaming videos,
Hmm.
that they didn't
Yeah.
come out with their own competitor and just provide a slight improvement on the content creator experience and just put it out there in order to compete. It's just always been surprising to me.
I don't know. Maybe they will. I mean, they have Twitch, and it seems to be gaining steam in a lot of
Hmm.
different new areas and stuff. So, maybe in the future we'll see some real competition there. I mean, I thought Vimeo was going to be a big competitor about 10 years ago, because everyone that I knew that was creating content was creating it for both platforms, and I was like, okay, that's a sign. When you start seeing people create it for both platforms, they're willing to take the time and effort in order to produce a slightly different version for a different platform, that tells you that they feel like something's there. And then they switched over to, I believe, a subscription model, and everyone I know that was on it just dropped off of it.
Yeah, I don't
So
I don't know what happened there.
yeah,
I think the feeling for me was that the brand perception of Vimeo was a little bit more. What's the word? It's a little bit more like a craftsman kind of experience rather
okay,
than just like anybody posting videos. So it was like, all right, well, I'm a serious photographer and I'm on a shoot or I'm filming something and here's some behind the scenes footage or something. It was a little bit less for any Joe Schmo who's like really good at a video game or is doing some kind of crafting or is cooking something to just
hmm,
start up their video channel.
That's true. Do you remember a couple of years ago? I mean, this is like a throwback. Maybe it was more than a couple of years ago. Maybe it was like 5 years ago. YouTube did something really smart. They actually started opening up YouTube studios, and
Hmm.
that you can go and produce your content in their studios. It's kind of like going to, I don't know, kind of a maker spot or something like that, where I think for them, if you're already a creator, it was like free. But if you weren't a creator, then you'd pay a small amount or whatever to use it.
Hmm.
But they would set up these amazing studios, and you can just go in and record all your content at those studios.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about YouTube is that there's like this, I don't know what to call it. It's kind of like an uncanny valley where on when it comes to the quality and the quantity of content, you have something like Disney, which isn't producing ultimately that many movies in the grand scheme of things. It's pretty much all scripted. Some of it's unscripted or partially scripted. But by putting out like one or two or three Marvel movies a year, they're keeping their quality pretty high. And one of the things to think about Marvel is I think of it less as a franchise and more of a studio. And within
Yeah,
that studio, they have different franchises. But what's unique about them is their franchises are interconnected. But on the other side of things, you might have, well, I'm going to criticize Netflix a little bit here because I feel like they're putting out a ton of content, but they're in the valley where they're putting out a lot of quantity. But I feel like a lot of it is like Christmas Prince movies, or you have some great stuff like Queen's Gambit that comes out every now and then, but that's usually separated by a couple months. And they're still pumping out a lot of content with that between that period. I don't. Not a lot of it is that great. So you end up unless you're really into that niche. But what it means is that it fills up to the point where now you have to wade through a lot of movies that you might not be interested in order to get the stuff that you are interested in. And then I feel like YouTube is over on the other side where there's so much stuff because it's user generated content that there just is a lot of really good content out there being put out regularly because there's so much. There way more than any of the other traditional streaming services that have like scripted content like a Netflix or HBO Max or any of those channels.
that's true. And actually, in the same vein, to what you're saying there, my number one pick that I had on my list here was Disney Plus specifically for The Mandalorian.
Oh yeah.
So you hadn't mentioned The Mandalorian when you were talking about some of these shows, but that show was an anchor for our family for the entire year. The weeks would get tiring and long, and lots going on between homeschooling and you and I being very busy, and my wife being very busy with her career and things like that. And to know that like we were going to sit down Friday night and watch another amazing episode of The Mandalorian was such a cool anchor for us. Like
Yeah, I mean,
I
it's
love it.
so great to have something to look forward to every Friday. It's like, all right, well, Friday night we can sit down and watch The Mandalorian together.
It's funny because we went through this whole period where everybody wanted this whole series to be dropped at one time. And now we're actually kind of excited that things like The Mandalorian only come out every Friday night because it kind of forces us to have something to look forward to every week.
Yeah, I think that there's something to be said for just switching things up, right? We have the Netflix model where you're just dropping a whole season, you binge it all. And then you have the more traditional model where it's coming out every Friday or something like that. And then you have something like Rick and Morty where out of the blue, they'll just drop an episode. It's like, oh, hey, here's an episode. It's basically it's part of season 3, but the rest of the season is going to be out for like a few months. But here's an episode for you, and then everybody
Yeah,
goes crazy, and they're like, oh, there's a new Rick and Morty, and they all rush to go watch it. I think it's awesome that they're shaking it up and they're varying things. It's not just the same schedule all the
I would
time.
agree with that. It's kind of fun. So, what did you have on your list for your number two?
So number 2, I went with something a little bit more edifying. YouTube is a great time filler and time waster when you're, especially if you need something in the background while you're washing dishes or something. But I went with a book, and this book is a little bit of a cheat because it's 1,001 movies to watch before you die.
Oh, okay.
So it's one book, but it's 1,001 movies. And what I liked about this is, number one, you go through and there's a bunch of the movies themselves. Some of them are the best movies ever made. Some of them are influential for whatever, either a technical or artistic reason, or they were just like a big cultural touchstone. And a lot of the more recent movies are going to be movies like Indiana Jones and Star Wars and The Godfather, and some of the Marvel movies make it in. So a lot of the newer ones I've actually seen, but some of the earlier ones, especially, I found out pretty quickly that it's really helpful to kind of work through it in a chronological order.
Okay.
Um, that way, like some of the silent films, I thought they were all going to be like, all right, well, we're going to get movies that are like 15 minutes, maybe towards the end we'll get up to an hour.
Hmm.
And some of the earliest ones were there, and they were just like technology demonstrators, and we're going to point a camera at a literal stage and not move it and film something. But as it got closer and closer to sound movies, there were like these 4, 6, 7 hour movies coming out, and they were a bit of a slog to get through. So it was definitely like, if you can build up a little bit of silent film tolerance, it was really helpful. uh,
What was like the biggest thing you learned from watching some of these movies from different generations? Like, did you see a progression
yeah.
in our society over time?
Well, one of the things that's really cool and really helpful, especially even for our work, right? Because all of our work is so much about experience and how experience gets crafted, is you get to see how cinema got developed, right? How it differentiated from theater. Like the earliest stuff was like, all right, here's theater on film. We're pointing a camera at a stage and we're just filming it. And there's not a lot of crosscuts. There's not a lot of different angles. But then you start seeing slowly get introduced from some visionaries like D.W. Griffith and Orson Welles and Charlie Chaplin, how they started developing cinema as an independent art form, where you're getting in, close-ups and Dutch angles and crane shots, and how all these things start to come together. And then you get into Gantz and Eisenstein and how editing became a means of storytelling, how quick cuts or smash cuts and different ways in which the editing was done in order to create a feeling in the viewer. And you get to see it kind of develop over time, and how new concepts get integrated and they spread throughout the filmmaking community. And that was really cool because it reframes how you think about new art forms or mediums like VR, for example. Like storytelling in VR is going to take a visionary like an Orson Welles or like a Akira Kurosawa to come in there and kind of reestablish what are the new rules for how you tell a story
Hmm.
within VR.
So, do you feel though, like the stuff that we saw, for example, in like the 60s versus like the 80s versus the 2000s, there was a natural progression of like society though? Meaning, like someone once
Yeah.
said to me, the reason why I'm asking this, someone once said to me, if you go back and watch really, really old movies, it gives you a glimpse into how we actually were thinking at that time and how we treated others and how we perceive society.
Yeah, you definitely do, especially if you're looking at like European films going into the 30s and then coming out of the 40s and 50s. What they chose as subject material were so much of like the 30s and 20s and 30s were films about royalty and very, very wealthy people. And then you get into, coming out of World War II, and you start getting into like Italian neorealism, where it's about poor people and like the bicycle thieves and societal issues and more social issues that are not just about like social critiques of the ruling class. But then you also start to see in the US, for example, the progression from pre-code films to the Code Enforcement Authority, which was basically a censorship board, and how that ended up starting to get disassembled into the 50s and 60s and replaced with the MPAA rating system we have now. So you get to
Oh,
see
interesting.
kind of how, like in the 40s, for example, under the code enforcement, and it's one of the reasons why Hollywood gets a bad rap for how they did storytelling. But at the time, it was illegal to have a film with that basically with a sad ending. You had to have a happy ending.
That's so
Like if you had
weird
a
to me.
criminal in a film, they had to be brought to justice by the end of the film. Otherwise, it wasn't going to get approved by the censor board and allowed to be released.
Wow. I bet most people don't know that. Like, have
Yeah,
no idea. I had no idea until you just said that right now.
yeah. So there was quite a few awesome films. Like there was an Orson Welles movie, Magnificent Ambersons, I want to say, where he was forced by the board to go back and tack on a happy ending. when that wasn't what the film originally was.
Yeah, I mean, man, things have really changed. I mean, and now look, you can pretty much upload anything you want onto YouTube, and that becomes like the new entertainment for people in 2020, right? Or
Oh yeah,
2021.
that's very
It's
interesting. So, what do you got for your second one?
completely different than that. I have the Costco stand-up desk, which
Oh
I
yeah,
know it sounds kind of basic, but man, did it save me. So I'm tall. I don't know if everybody knows this, probably don't, but I'm actually 6'5". So finding a comfortable desk has always been a little bit of an issue. And this beautifully made stand-up desk it's amazing. So basically, the desk can go all the way down to the sitting position, all the way up to the standing position comfortably for someone my height. In addition to that, it's got USB built onto the side of it. It's got a beautiful glass top. I think the price range, I think it was only $399, which is really good for a stand up desk.
great
Um,
for a stand-up desk.
yeah, build quality is amazing on it. Uh, they sold out immediately. I ended up purchasing mine, I think about 4 or 6 weeks before the pandemic really kicked in, and so we were able to get one. And then the minute that the pandemic hit in March of 2020, they were all sold out immediately because everyone knew that they were going to be home for quite some time. So it's from Costco. It's a stand up desk. It doesn't have any other like labeling on it to indicate like the brand.
Mhm.
But it was on their website for the longest time. Absolutely phenomenal. Can't live without it. Like my back no longer hurts. I stand up for half of my meetings. It's been a godsend.
Oh, that's awesome. Does it fits into your workspace pretty well too?
Yeah, so it's not super huge. It's pretty nice. I think this is probably about I don't know. I think it's about 4 feet wide, right?
Hmm.
Which fits nicely into most work areas. Some of the other ones I was looking at originally were like these super huge desks, and some of them had a crank
Yeah.
on the side where you crank them up and everything. I just looked all around for everything, and this one really fit the bill.
Yeah, I've heard from a
And
lot of people that they wanted a stand-up desk, but A, a lot of them are very expensive, and B, a lot of them are designed for like office spaces where if you're, somebody living in a place in San Francisco, it's going to be spaces at a huge premium.
exactly. And I don't know if you remember back a long time ago when we first started the company, we were working with some military subcontractors, and you and I were working on ergonomics. And one of the
Hmm.
things we did is we remember we were required to go through that training class. It was like a ergonomic training for workspace because we were going to be working on site for a while.
Yeah.
I still go back to when I was sitting there and she was taking all of the measurements of me and she
Hmm.
was saying like, "Oh yeah, most of the desks that you've been sitting at, they don't fit you right." And so I was like, "Oh, no wonder my back always hurts after I've been working for a while." And that has really stuck with me ever since we did that. And that was probably 12 years ago.
Yeah, I remember that because I remember thinking to myself, "Hey, we do ergonomics. That's a big part of our job." Um, but at the same time, it's one of those the cobbler's son has no shoes because we're spending all of our time thinking about somebody else's ergonomics, not our own. So it was
Oh,
one of those
exactly.
instances where somebody actually forced us to take care of our own ergonomics.
I mean, you and I have done so many crazy and interesting projects where ergonomics weren't even remotely involved for us. Like sitting on the ground in the middle of the desert to standing in a corner, remember, in a tiny office in Berkeley, California. And I think we had to stand for like 9 hours
Yeah, those
straight because
we're doing the ethno on the startups.
yeah, doing ethnography on startups and trying to hide in a corner and film them the entire time that they're working and stuff like that. I mean, it's ergonomics weren't even part of our vocabulary during that time, but we learned a lot and it's been an amazing experience. So what do you got for number three?
So I will follow up with something similar in that it helped me be productive in a way that kept me sane. I'm going to say my mesh router. So I found out, and I've been telling everybody that a lot of the times that the router that they give you, the all-in-one router and modem that they give you when you sign up with your ISP, is not always the best router in the world, and it can be worth upgrading. So one of the problems that we had is that in certain parts of the house, or if I wanted to go outside, the router that came with that was provided to me by my ISP was not great for providing coverage. So I did some research and I picked up a mesh router. And if you're not familiar with a mesh router is, it sets up what's called a mesh network, where different things that are connected to the router become like little mini routers. They're like little extenders for the network that it can extend the network over more space. So if you have, for example, a big yard like I do, you can set up a couple your main mesh router into your modem, and then set up additional nodes, and that'll extend your Wi-Fi coverage throughout your backyard, so you can go work under a nice oak tree in your backyard and have great connection the entire time.
That's awesome. I ended up with the same problem. I ended up having to upgrade to the Arlo system, and it has these satellites that, like you said, that you kind of mount all over the place, and it kind of extends the network. And surprisingly, I can probably podcast from the backyard if I wanted to,
Oh
because the
yeah.
signal is so strong. And I don't know how they do it specifically, because I used to have those ones. What were they called? We had the repeater system, and the
Yeah.
repeater system never worked. It always would. It would start really strong, like in the center, and then it would get weaker and weaker. Where this one, I haven't had any loss of signal or fidelity or anything like that
Mhm.
across the entire network.
Well, I think mesh routers are absolutely the future, especially when it comes to like public utilities. Like if you're going to provide Wi-Fi within a park or something,
Uh huh.
they're pretty much probably using mesh routers where they're setting up nodes throughout the area in order to provide connection throughout. Or if you have like a large library or something like that, and you could cover an entire city, right? You just install them into your utility boxes and things, and then a city like Mountain View, which has Google provided Wi-Fi throughout the entire city.
Hmm.
This is the technology that can allow something like that.
Yeah, and in the same kind of vein of like a tech product to help us, my number three ended up being the Blue Yeti microphone.
Oh,
So the
nice.
microphones that you and I ended up buying for podcasting, we both ended up using those for the million meetings that we do every week. And the quality is just phenomenal. Like it's not only a beautiful looking microphone, but it has a lot of features. It works really well, and the price is great. I think
Yeah.
they're only $149 each, and you're getting like almost studio quality from it. You and I used to work at NASA a long time ago, and we worked in the advanced audio lab, or I worked in the advanced audio lab. You were in the advanced controls lab. They changed the names a couple of times, but we used to use really high end microphones, and those microphones would cost a lot. Remember, there was like 500,000, 2,000, 6,000. I mean, just really expensive high end stuff. The quality on this is, to me, almost the same at $149. And it's been great. It's really helped out a lot. I mean, have
Yeah.
you same thing for you?
Oh, absolutely. So before we got the Blue Yeti, I was making it work with the condenser mic, and so we had like this Audio Technica condenser mic with a pop filter and a stand, and went into a mixing board, then the mixing board into the computer, and there was some kind of a preamp somewhere, and it took all of that hardware and it just it all consolidated it into one product, and it I was able to remove multiple pieces of hardware just by taking this one microphone with the stand built in, with all the settings built into the actual microphone. You have your monitor volume, your mute button, your gain control, all these things just integrated into a single product that just plugs into the USB. You don't have separate power, none of those things, and it's simplified things so much. It's a great example of somebody taking a look at what was kind of a complex, slightly painful process, and applying real experience design to it to provide something much better and
Also,
cheaper
it's the
relative to buying
same
all those things.
microphone that Oprah Winfrey uses. I saw a picture. It's really funny. I didn't tell you this. I saw a picture of her on a podcast and from her home, and she was using a Blue Yeti. And I was like, that's pretty awesome. And it's only $149
Yeah.
microphone, so great,
And we
great product.
remember, or you remember from when you're working at NASA, I did a lot of psychophysics stuff. So that was like what is the level of difference between like audio quality that's actually noticeable to people? And I haven't seen, for example, what is the difference in audio quality from a technical standpoint between those expensive condenser mics that we used to use and a Blue Yeti. But as a listener, I can't tell the difference.
Yeah, me either. And that's what matters the most, right? Is there maybe the other very very expensive microphones technically, like when you look at the spec sheet, are better, but if you
Mm-hmm.
can't tell the difference and our listeners love it, then hey, home run for us, right?
Yeah.
So number 4. What's your number 4?
So number 4, I'm going to go back to entertainment, and I'm going to mention my PS4
Okay.
uh, because it has provided me a massive amount of entertainment and also like a bit of an escape. Like when you're deep into a game about about a lethal pandemic, for example, it helps you to kind of step away from the actual lethal pandemic that's sweeping through society. So I got a chance to play. Having a little bit more time, got the chance to go back and play a lot of the games that I've been meaning to play for quite a while, like Bloodborne or Uncharted, and I got to play through Last of Us 2, which was amazing, and Final Fantasy VII Remake. Like, these are all great experiences. I think the PS4 it's at the end of its life cycle, but I think it's been a fantastic console. I think that the distribution, the hardware, everything has been somewhat flawless in a way. Like the new stuff is coming out, and we're starting to see the new generation of games, and I don't really see a huge difference in them
Mm-hmm.
between what is available on a PS5 platform versus PS4, unless you're playing Cyberpunk 2077, and that's been a big issue in the news. But it has been fantastic, and it's been a great way also to reconnect with friends and to play games together online. And I think it handles online multiplayer better than like a Switch, and the games available are better than on the Xbox. I'm sorry to say for the Xbox fans out there, but the exclusives have been much better for PS4.
Yeah,
And I think that a lot of my friends who are gamers who have just found the sheltering in place and quarantines and stuff just a little bit easier because they have this additional art form that has tremendous value available to them.
I would agree with you 100%. You know me, I don't play a ton of games. I now play a lot more than I ever have. We have a Switch, which we got early on when the pandemic first hit. We weren't planning on buying a Switch, but we kept getting locked in the house. But what a lot of people don't know is that it wasn't just the pandemic. Our wildfires were so bad here, you couldn't even go outside. So gaming became that thing. Like you can only draw so much, build things in your house, clean up your house, watch TV, and do puzzles. And suddenly you're like, okay, what else are we going to do? And so game consoles and all the new games that were being released and being able to connect with friends, just like you said, has been such a savior because for me, it was less about the pandemic and more about the wildfires because I like going out for walks or riding my bike or whatever, which you can do during the pandemic with a mask on.
Mhm.
But when the wildfires were so bad that you had to literally close all your windows and run air purifiers for like weeks on end, I mean, what else were we going to do?
Heat waves too. So you had your air purifier, you had your air conditioning, and you had to stay inside.
Yeah, it was a rough time, but I'll tell you, you were 100% spot on when you told me early on. You're like, "Hey, dude, gaming is saving me because I
Yeah.
can I can relax at night and still talk to friends and I think you use like Discord and stuff, right, to chat."
Sometimes, yeah. I mean, if you're on Switch, which is I think is the only console you have, you kind of have to use something like Discord because they don't have voice chat in it.
Uh-huh.
But for PlayStation and Xbox, you can just connect up through the actual PlayStation or Xbox and talk through that. So they have their online audio chat system already set up. One thing I'll point out though about the value of gaming. So one game that I played through in during the pandemic was Death Stranding, which
Mhm.
has also been a controversial game. I didn't know that if I was going to like it or not. It's definitely like it could definitely see some improvement in some aspects of it, but there are parts of that game that just really appealed to me, especially like some of the infrastructure management stuff. I get a little nerdy about that, but I ended up putting 140 hours in. I got a platinum medal, and then when I got the platinum medal, I looked back to see how much time I'd put in. It was 140 hours, 140 hours of entertainment for $60. So for the
Yeah.
price of maybe 3 trips to the movie theater, I got, what is that, like 70 movies worth of entertainment?
Yeah, we talked about this a while back, and I think we were going to go into more depth on another podcast episode when we circle back on streaming and movies and things like that. But
Mhm.
when you do the math, gaming, it's pretty amazing. It's just like what you outlined right there, right? Like it's you can keep playing the game over and over again. It continues. You can have add-on packs, things like that. But when it comes to like a movie or even a series, right? It's like you watch it, you don't really want to go back and watch it again. I mean, sometimes, but not often.
Yeah, gaming has so much more replay value built into it. And also just because of the ages that we are, we kind of got to see, kind of like what I was mentioning with the 1001 movies to watch before you die, where you can go back and see how cinema grew up as an art form. We
Hmm.
lived through video games growing up as an art form. Like
Correct.
the how you had storytelling introduced with like Metal Gear Solid, or 3D gaming introduced with like Super Mario 64. We got to see all that. We're all familiar with it. How we came from Pong to here.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, did I tell you on a side note? I don't think I mentioned it. But for Christmas last year, I ended up getting the Nintendo Entertainment System Lego kit.
Oh, nice.
You know, the one that actually you build the whole NES with the controllers, the television, and it has Mario, and you can like turn the switch and Mario jumps through it. I haven't started it yet because we've been so busy with the podcast and work and other things like that. And I want to have like a dedicated table because I think it has, I think it has like 4,000 pieces or something in it. Right? It's huge, but it is beautiful. And I'm really looking forward to building it and seeing how it turns out at the end.
Yeah, that should be awesome. I bet your son is stoked for that.
Yeah, he is. Although he's a little young, so like that's a lot of pieces. So I told him, I said, we could work on it here and there. I said, well, let's just not put a time limit on it.
Mhm.
We'll just hack at it here and there, and then eventually one day it'll be done. But so, anyways, my number 4 is once again completely different than yours. It is a farmstead food delivery. So
Oh,
most
nice.
people are not going to be familiar with the service because this is more of a local service to where we live on the peninsula in Silicon Valley. So basically, we started this service 2 years before the pandemic began. And basically, what it is you can go in and you can order fresh vegetables, milk, all that kind of stuff. And then they drop it off on your front porch once a week. And we started doing it because having two of us working plus my son being in school and things like that, we noticed that having to go to the store on a regular basis was kind of annoying. It kind of got in the way because our schedules were getting busier. And then the big benefit of this one was prices are great, but most of the food, almost all of it, comes from farms in the area. So the milk, the veggies, the everything come from the Central Valley and Salinas area. So it felt really good to be purchasing from local farmers. It has been unbelievable. They expanded the service during the pandemic to offer many more things. And so every Saturday morning, we get all these bags with ice and everything inside of them, and all of this fresh vegetables from local farmers and even just normal foods that you would order from Safeway or any other place that you shop at. And just having it dropped off at the front porch, and then you just kind of clean everything up, bring it to the house, and you're good to go for the week. It saves so much time. And also just the energy and mental energy of going to the store when there's a pandemic, right? Having to mask up and all that kind of stuff. So it's been great and I love it. And I hope that Farmstead can expand beyond Silicon Valley and start to get to other areas because their service is phenomenal.
Yeah, I think that's really fascinating. We have been doing, in our work, we've at multiple points talked to people about how they felt about grocery delivery services, and there's always been this kind of inertia where, like, yeah, it's probably more convenient, but I don't necessarily trust it, and like, how's it going to sit outside for a while, and all of these things that were stopping people from really trying it out, and we helped with some of these services, kind of get some of the issues hashed out. But I feel like one of the effects of the pandemic is people are trying out things that they've only thought about before, and some of them they're finding they're really liking it.
Yeah, and it's becoming a more common thing. So a while back, before the pandemic, people were saying, "Well, oh, grocery delivery is only for people who are willing to pay a premium." But
Hmm.
once everyone kind of got locked in to their homes, a lot of these companies, because they're tech companies, they're funded, right, is that they reduced the initial cost of kind of getting into the platform,
Hmm.
and making it reasonable for everyone. And then also the larger companies like Safeway and stuff like that, if you spend over a certain amount, which is anyone who has more than two people in their house is going to spend over $50 or $70 or whatever the number is, delivery is free.
Yeah.
So I think this is just the new norm. And I know we did a whole podcast on this, but just the feeling as I look around the neighborhood and talk to a lot of different people, and everyone says like, oh yeah, I have food delivered. They don't all have everything delivered, but they like to have their vegetables delivered, or they like to have their milk delivered, or things like that. And it's just one extra thing to kind of help you out during the week, especially when you're busy or stressed out, or running out of things and don't have the opportunity to jam over to the store, especially if you have a couple children that you're taking care of that are working from home, right?
Hmm.
Or
Yeah,
going to
absolutely.
school from home. Yeah.
Yeah, like for us, one of the big ones was using grocery delivery with Costco, because for Costco it's only $35 and then your delivery is free. And I've always felt like going to Costco, except during very specific times, was such a nightmare because you had parking, then you had to go in, you had to find everything, and then the lines can be incredibly long. And just doing it through, I think they do it through Instacart, was a game changer. It's $35. That's like buying, if you buy two or three things, you're pretty much there, especially if you're buying something that costs a little bit more. And then you can be stocked up for like the month on food.
Yeah. Well, I do have to say though, Costco is one of those places where I actually kind of enjoyed going to, because there's so much neat stuff to look at and you never know what's going to be
Yeah.
in there. But on the
Well,
same note, is my impulse buying at Costco is through the roof. So if
yeah, that's one of the other benefits, is that it can really keep your impulse buying under control. At least for now. I imagine at some point they're going to find a way to do some more merchandising on the website in order to get people to buy, that sweater or that vest that they really didn't know that they wanted.
exactly. So, all right, ready? Drum roll. What's your fifth and final?
My fifth and final, last but not least, has been curbside pickup. So
Ooh.
I mentioned before how people have talked about all these things that they were interested in but hadn't tried yet, and then they tried it and they really liked it. For me, that was curbside pickup.
Yeah. Which ones do you use? Which stores?
Well, Home Depot has been big, especially with my mom trying to actually get her to treat herself like she is a high risk person that she is. Uh, she keeps going to Home Depot, so I've been like, all right, well, and when she goes to Home Depot, it's not like a quick trip. She goes there for a couple hours. She wants to browse around. She chats with people. She's very social, and she has her own Home Depot credit card. My dad worked at Home Depot for years, so it's all a big experience for her. So we tried to push her more towards like, all right, well, we're going to order it online, and then we're going to go drive there, park. We're going to text them, and somebody's going to bring it out to the car for us. And that has helped us out quite a bit, limit exposure, but also cut down on the, hey, I'm looking through this Home Depot, which is different from the Home Depot I normally go to, which even at that Home Depot I normally go to, if I'm buying something I don't normally buy, then I'm digging through the shelves to try to find it. And I worked in Home Depot when I was in high school also, and I still get lost in those stores. So it's been a tremendous help on that extent. And then there's a lot of, I like to do as much curbside pickup as possible. One, because my partner is in the restaurant industry. She's a chef. And every time I talk about, like, hey, let's get some DoorDash or something, she gives me a look. And then if I don't respond, the next phrase is like, those are really hurting restaurants, right? So then it becomes, all right, well, I will go do the curbside pickup at the restaurant, or at the Total Wine or BevMo or Target or wherever else we might be going. So it's also nice to just get out of the house and drive around, and you're still safe inside your car, but you're not just staring at the same four walls over and over again.
Yeah, I would agree with you. A lot of times when we do curbside pickup for Target, I'm always like, I'll go just to get out of the house for a little bit, and
Yeah.
just listen to the radio or something, just kind of shakes things up. One thing I've noticed about curbside is that it seems like every one of these companies has the same service where you click the little button that says, I'm here, and then
Mhm.
you tell them the stall number or whatever it is. Have you done any research? Are they all using like the same like third party service to get this going, or are these companies individually designing these curbside systems?
Well, I mean, curbside's been around for a while, right? But it's one of those things that I haven't used that much until we got to the pandemic. So I imagine to some extent, kind of like the self checkout machines have gotten better with generations that have passed, that they've also worked it out. I imagine, I haven't done any research on this. I imagine that there is a company who's providing it as kind of a turnkey solution to different retailers. And I actually love the fact that unlike delivery, it is much easier for mom and pop shops to buy into a turnkey service like Clover, for example, that can just allow any store maybe that's been in the family for generations to just add on curbside pickup to their service offering where maybe delivery is economically not viable. So you can have there's a Mongolian barbecue shop that's not too far from my house, and they have curbside pickup, and they're the one of the least technical companies I've ever come across, and it's been fantastic. Like you order ahead of time, you show up, it's ready to go, no waiting. You go in, you tap to pay, they hand you your food, and you move on.
Yeah, these are great. I mean, heck, you and I saw this stuff in Japan in like 2000
8, 7,
eight,
something like
seven
that.
or eight, whenever we were there. And I remember because we were taking the train everywhere, and then they said like, oh, you can. I think it was the same card, right? It's like you can use the train card, but you can also go into like those bakeries and stuff. And we would just swipe the card and then just grab something from the bakery, and they had that all worked out like back then. And we're just now starting to really see this unfold locally.
Yeah, and I think that tap to pay has really taken off, and I love tap to pay. Now, if people don't know, it's more secure than paying with your card. Like if you're using a lot of the major services like Apple Pay or Google Pay or Samsung Pay or something like that, then the merchant's not even getting access to your card information. It's using a unique identifier. So if you're using it at Target and then Target gets hacked, your information is not being exposed. So tap to pay is great. I think that it has blossomed. So there are so many more places that accept it now, and it's been fantastic. And it's faster, it's easier. And then I think right behind that, curbside pickup is something that almost every single shop and store can do going forward, and it's relatively cheap and easy to do. And I imagine it will just get better over time. Where now it will, track your inventory very effectively and let you know when you need to reorder or how much you need to reorder, and where those things are in the store and all of that. I think that it's going to be huge.
Yeah, even our vet has curbside pickup. So we call the
Oh,
vet and we order because our cat is ill, so he has a lot of medical needs and stuff. So there's a bunch of stuff we have to buy to take care of him. And we make one phone call, they charge it over the phone, and then we drive in, you back up your car, you open up the trunk, they walk out, they drop it in, and then you drive off. So they even figured out their own curbside pickup. And this is like a little tiny vet.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that because of the great people who are doing all the experience work for these small businesses, mom and pop shops, that they can all get access to it. And if it's really complicated, engineering heavy systems, then they might not be able to. That might be something that gets reserved for the big box retailers.
Exactly. All right. So my fifth and final
Yeah, what you got?
drum roll is the 630 Beach Cruiser from Southern California. So here's what happened. So in the beginning of the pandemic, I have a mountain bike and I was looking around and my son was just learning how to ride a bike, and I'd be riding this mountain bike and it has like clip-ins in it, and all over the streets and that kind of stuff. And one day my wife goes, "You just need like a normal bike, like a regular bike." And I was like, "I know it'd be so much nicer to have just a regular bike to cruise around and get exercise in and enjoy the summer." So I started doing a bunch of research and I started typing in beach cruisers for super large humans, big guys, that kind of stuff. And a bunch of articles came up about a couple different companies selling beach cruisers for big people like me. That's over 6'4". And this company came up called 630, and they're based in Southern California. And they make a really, really nice bike, but at a really reasonable cost. So I was able to get this beautiful, like matte black beach cruiser with all the bells and whistles on it for less than, I think it was like $415, and have it delivered to the house. And I built it myself. Most of it, it's mostly put together, but you have to kind of put together a couple pieces at the very end. And it has been wonderful. I have put more miles on that beach cruiser than I think I've ever put on my mountain bike. I ride it every single day. I follow my son down the street and we go goof off for an hour or so and get some exercise and have some fun. And it's been great. The only thing is that once the pandemic hit, I had to wait 3 months to get the bike because
Oh
every
yeah.
single bike sold out. Apparently, that was the big in California specifically. The big thing during the pandemic and during summertime was everyone wanted to have a bike because you couldn't go anywhere. And so every bike sold out and you couldn't get anything. So I had to order mine, no big deal. I waited 3 months and then ended up getting it, I think somewhere around September or something like that, and have ridden it every day since I got it. It's been phenomenal and the price is great. I highly recommend the company. It's a small company. I think that was started by one person out of their garage and has grown into a kind of regional bike, right? People buy them from all around the world because you can buy them online, but it's a small company and it's so cool to support a small business in the same state that I live in.
Yeah. How much did you say that cost you?
I think it was like $415 after tax and everything.
That is an amazing deal for a bike
It
of that quality.
it is, especially with my size, right? So whenever you try to buy like an XL bike, which technically an XL only goes up to 6'4", and I'm 6'5", they're always significantly more expensive. But this was reasonably priced. It's great, and it's mostly made out of steel, so it's very durable, very strong. It's great. I just highly recommend it for anyone who's looking for a new bicycle.
That's awesome. Do you know if the like frame is made to order or if they just adding on the different components to make it fit?
I think they add the different components to make it fit. I mean, they built a bike that was designed for taller people for sure. But if you look at their website now, they have a ton of bikes on there. You can get an e-bike, you can get, I think they even have a trike. Like if you're worried about falling over, apparently there's this new trend for older people to get trikes because they won't tip, but yet you can get out and get exercise.
That's awesome. Yeah, that sounds fantastic. California is so big on biking since you can do it year round here. You don't need snow tires or anything. And it's and a lot of the cities here are a bit more spread out. So it makes sense to have a bike to get where you're going. You can give your car a rest. It's a great experience.
Yeah, as a side note, before we wrap up, one thing I did want to say that has really made me happy during this challenging time of this pandemic was I don't live too far from the beach. So it's like 25 minutes or something. So we tend to go to the beach a lot and just walk on the beach. And I was out there a couple of months ago and it was kind of like hard packed sand early in the morning, a little bit chilly, but like really not really nice day, right? And I'm like sitting on the beach. My son and I are kind of goofing off, and I look over and I see someone cruise by on the beach on the sand on one of those one wheels. You ever seen those?
Yeah,
They're like a skateboard, but they have a motor in them. Then about 10 or 15 minutes later, someone else cruises by on an electric bike. And then like 10 or 15 minutes later, two people are riding by on normal bikes. And I have to say, I haven't seen so much outdoor activity ever since I've been in California. I mean, a lot of people obviously go out and ride bikes and surf and have fun, but I've seen so many people on the beach walking, dogs, bicycles, one wheels, just people are just getting out and living and getting fresh air. And I really hope that this continues to be a trend because it's such a healthy and good thing for people to do both physically and mentally.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that the emergence of electric vehicles, like the electric bikes and things, and those one wheels, has helped out quite a bit because not everybody, because of their health or their age or whatever, can always be pedaling a bike in order to get around. But at the same time, sometimes you want to. Sometimes you can get some time in, and when you get too tired, you can switch over to electric power. And I think that's really helped broaden who has access to this kind of experience.
Exactly. Well, hey, Dee, this was super fun. I'm glad that we decided to do this because it's always exciting, at least for me, when I listen to podcasts and people are like, these are the products I love. I think this is a wrap for today's episode. And I just wanted to remind all of our listeners that we are on every podcast platform now. So please subscribe to us. It really helps us a lot. We've been growing rapidly since we began this podcast last year. And we're just so happy to also be able to hear from you. Sometimes we get messages on Twitter, and that's great. So thank you so much for listening, and we will see you all next week.